podcast studios. This is After 9 with Scott and Kat.
Hey now!
How you feeling, Scott? You tired?
I am exhausted. Exhausted.
I'm tired too, actually.
What a night, though. It was election night in America, and if you heard yesterday's pod, you probably know that we had Reggie Cecchini, Global News Washington correspondent, on at the end of the pod. He's going to be on at the end of this pod as well, talking about the aftermath of what happened last night when Donald J. Trump became the 47th president of the United States. 45 and 47. It's almost exactly the way I predicted it would happen here, Kat.
Yeah.
My prediction was spot on. And I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying that because I feel like the pollsters and the media in particular got it wrong because they refuse to accept that there is a groundswell of middle-class people that are hurting because of the economy, and it always was and it always will be about the economy first. They did some exit polling, and they asked people, how important is these issues to you? The economy was number one in every single state. Abortion, which is what Kamala Harris tried to make the election about, 12% said that that was their top issue in this election. So what they banked on, trying to get them to win the election, didn't pay off at all.
Yeah, I mean, I still worry about women there. I do. Thankfully, there are other options for them that are in that predicament. That sucks. But it's not necessarily like, I just don't understand what happened, though, in terms of like Joe Biden was president, though. What couldn't he have done something, or still could technically until January, to change that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, why did they run on that? Because that takes time. And so she thought, I'll be the I don't know how it works there. I think we have our own issues here. Like, and of course, whatever happens there is going to impact us here too. I get that. But I feel like we have so many more issues closer to home. I don't know.
The irony of what you just said is in the U.S., abortion actually is very much an issue. Now, Trump has said he wants the states to decide the abortion laws for each state. And we all know that we're made up of different people. For example, if you look at the election results in California, it went overwhelmingly Democrat. It always does. So you would think then they have Democratic values. In some states, Trump won it and it wasn't even close. So if those are Republicans, do they have the same similar sentiment? Could they use an abortion policy that's a little more nuanced? Maybe a compromise like, yes, we have abortion, but not after the second trimester or something like that. He wants it to be made at a state level so it's reflective of how the people in that community feel. In Canada, there's no threat whatsoever to abortion, yet that's what our opposition in the next election, which will be the Liberals, are trying to make an election issue here. Really, really weird. I'm wondering if they're going to back off of that once they see that it didn't have any impact at all for Kamala Harris last night.
I was wondering that too. As I was looking at it, I was just kind of, like I said, because we have issues closer to home, I was wondering if that was a reflection of what could happen here similarly. And I think a lot of us will ask that question. How will it impact Canadians, do you think, in terms of tariffs? I know that was a big thing people were talking about, as well, as Donald Trump's going to make things a lot harder to get. He's going to make things more expensive for them to get and us to get back and forth between two countries. Is there any like proof of that? Well,
one thing that I learned in the first Trump presidency that has sort of been missing for the last 4 years is, at the end of the day, Trump is still very much a negotiator. And sometimes it's an important negotiation tactic to put your stance out there and say, this is the way it's going to be. Mm-hmm. Now, all the other countries are on notice. Hey, if Trump gets in, he's going to charge tariffs. Now it's on those nations like ours to make a deal with America, either to be exempted or to trade tariffs. Maybe they have tariffs on incoming Canadian steel. Maybe we have tariffs on incoming Amazon products, whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. The tactic was always to scare and make other countries realize we're not just going to have our way with America anymore. They'll start charging us a tariff on everything we send to America if we don't fall in line with what they want done. I see it as a negotiation tactic. I don't think for sure we're going to have tariffs on everything that gets exported from Canada to the U.S. It would be almost impossible. I do think they're going to renegotiate NAFTA again, and they probably should. I think that there's going to be a tense relationship between Canada and the U.S. for the next little while. Justin Trudeau has pissed Donald Trump off, and vice versa. We all remember that incident where it was a G7 or something where
Yeah.
Trudeau was caught on a hot mic making fun of Trump, and Trump went nuts on him.
Yeah, I'm curious how that dynamic is going to go this time around.
Well, I mean, the shoe is on the other foot at this point. Back then, Trump had a lot to lose, right? He needed to run again to get reelected, and he almost did in 2020. Justin Trudeau's in a very different position, and I think, this is just me, I think that Liberals in Canada and New Democrats should take a serious look at exactly what happened last night. Traditional voting groups that would definitely in the past vote Democrat/liberal are Black Americans, Latino Americans, and so on and so forth. Donald Trump made massive inroads with those groups. Latinos supported Trump last night. Black Americans supported Trump last night. And if you're on the Democrat side or the liberal side, you can't take their vote for granted and just assume that they're going to vote for you. You have to earn their vote.
That's right.
And like I said at the beginning, it comes down to the economy. It's always been about the economy and always will be about the economy. And if the economy's bad, whoever's in power is pooched. That's why what happened in America last night, the polls say, is highly likely to happen in Canada when we do eventually get around to voting. Now, the pollsters were trying to tell people last night would be close. It wasn't close. Donald Trump won as we record right now. I know that they're still counting some absentee ballots and mail-in votes and stuff like that. Donald Trump won the popular vote. He's the first Republican to win the popular vote in years, I think since George W. Bush.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Americans like him. He won more than enough states that he needed to become president, and it all came despite the polls saying it was close.
The polls are like, I feel like, why do we keep going off of that anyway? I don't know who does, but like the polls are always wrong. They're wrong here. They're typically wrong, like it for the most part in other places. I don't understand it. I don't know. It seems like a fucking waste of time to me.
I think that the polls are, parties use polls and they pay pollsters not to tell them what they want to hear, but to tell them where the mood of the country is. However, what they share from those polls, that's a little bit different. And sometimes you can use a poll just because that there's a herd mentality, right? If you hear that 60% of Americans are voting for Kamala, then you feel like, oh, wow, I'm on the outside if I don't vote for Kamala.
Yeah, I wonder if that, do you think that works on some people?
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Interesting.
Social media is also more of an influence on campaigns now, more now than ever.
Huge. I noticed that, especially with this election. That really hit me. It was like everywhere. I had to like shut it down, like at a certain point. I'm like, I can't continue to see this shit, especially from celebrities. We had that conversation yesterday. You can go back and hear what we had to say about celebrities. Particularly, I mean, not everybody was pushing for Kamala. Of course, there's some celebrities that were happily, openly supporting Trump. But nonetheless, just in general, them putting their politics out there, it's just gross. Well, I think so. I just don't like it. I don't think it's a good look for any celebrity.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that. Last night, America said no, absolutely not, to Barack and Michelle Obama, Beyonce, Lady Gaga, Katy Perry, Megan Thee Stallion, John Legend, Oprah Winfrey, Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Usher, Taylor Swift, George Clooney, Ariana Grande, Jamie Lee Curtis, Will.i.am, and the list goes on and on and on.
Do you think, okay, so can we just talk about theories for a second? Because we did kind of touch on the theories about celebrities, and especially when it comes to your J-Los and everybody who's linked, certain people, Beyonce, Jay-Z, all linked to rumors about Diddy, all of a sudden coming out and being like, I'm for Kamala. If does Donald J. Trump, I guess the question is, does Donald J. Trump have the power, if he wanted to? Do you think he could figure out what's going on behind the scenes there?
Okay, so my personal...
Not that people would tell him or fess up, but do you think he could find out?
I think that...
All right, I'm about to go.
I'll play that in a minute.
Okay.
There's a couple of reactions from last night that I want to play for you, and a couple segments from the news that I'm going to play for you, and then we'll get to Reggie at the end of this episode. I think that when it comes to the Diddy stuff, I think the U.S. government knows exactly what went on, who was involved, how many times they did it, what happened to the victims. I think nothing is a secret anymore. But Trump's not in the White House yet, and he's not privy to that information. When Trump does get into office, he's got an option. He could turn a blind eye, like clearly many people in the past have. Or he could say, you know what? It's sick what went on here, and we're going to prosecute it. But if he does that, then the other side, the Democrats, are going to accuse him of using his office to go after his political opponents. And it's going to get messy. It's absolutely going to get messy. But, I mean, before we even get to the Diddy stuff, Trump promised, and he better stick to this promise, that he would release the Epstein list.
Yes, we need that first.
Get the Epstein list out. Let's find out how many sickos were flying to an island in the Caribbean to sexually molest and abuse and worse to children.
And Trump, I don't care if they're your friends. Please do it for the good of everybody else.
100%.
Don't give anyone a favor, please.
I'm still sick at what I've heard went on Epstein Island and what I've heard went on at these freak-offs. And consenting adults can do whatever they want.
Totally. That's not what this is, though.
No, this was children were specifically brought in for the pleasure of these wealthy individuals.
And drugs were used in other cases so they were not consenting.
Yeah. So to me, that's what I want. I want the Epstein list, and I want to know if people that I was told for years I should respect and put on a pedestal were actually garbage. And I will feel so much shame if I did support these people when they were doing that sort of stuff in the background. But we need to know what went on there. There's a few things that Trump says he's going to do if he gets elected. I'm waiting for the war in Ukraine to end tomorrow. Trump said he could end it in 24 hours. Now, granted, he doesn't actually take over as president until January 20th. I'm going to that inauguration, by the way.
Are you going to go?
Yeah, I was at his last one, and I almost got beat up by Antifa, but we had guards protecting us as members of the media at his first inauguration, and I have a feeling this next one is going to be completely nuts. So I am going to go to his inauguration. That's when he takes over, but he can do some legwork in the background. If he says he can end the war in Ukraine in a day, I would hope that he's on the phone right now with Vladimir Putin saying, how are we going to get you out of Ukraine, get Ukraine back as sovereign territory, and everybody walks away feeling like they got what they wanted at the end?
Does Zelensky, right?
Zelensky,
thank you. Does Zelensky like him or vice versa, or is there any that we know?
Zelensky is on the left, and he's good friends with Trudeau. I mean, they're not just world leaders, they're friends. He was a friend and colleague of Macron in France and of you name it. He's certainly on the left. But he's also the president of a country that's under attack. And there's no reason to think that the U.S. is going to make any more payments to Ukraine because that's one of the things that Trump said was a waste of our money. It was funding a war that can't be won. No matter how much money you put into Ukraine, they're never going to beat the Russian army. So that's a concern. That Ukraine has and people who do support Ukraine has is that Trump's going to turn off the taps and they're going to get overrun. Probably what should happen here and what I would love to see happen is no more killing. No more dead Ukrainian soldiers or civilians. No more dead Russian civilians or soldiers. End that war. Make it right again. And let's get the world back on track for peace. But he's also got to deal with the Middle East. And he is a stalwart supporter of Israel. I don't know what's going to happen to Gaza. I don't know what's going to happen in Lebanon or with Iran. But the Iranian currency dropped like a rock right after Trump was announced the winner last night. By the way, other things that happened last night after Trump was announced the winner is the stocks just went crazy. Futures, bonds, overnight trading went nuts. In particular, crypto went nuts. The highest value in years, apparently, because Trump got elected and he's seen as someone who is favorable to crypto. So interesting things are going to happen, Kat. I know that this is not the outcome some people wanted. I know that. I heard it from people yesterday. People who say, you know what? I agree with you and most of your political viewpoints, but I just don't like Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. You don't have to like the guy at all.
I don't like any. Can I just say there's no politician I do like?
Really?
No.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
Absolutely. We have hundreds of millions of people in North America alone, for Canada, for the U.S. And these are the people that are coming forward. Like, it's so disappointing to me.
I know so many people from social media that are clearly good, smart, decent, competent, capable people that would make excellent politicians. And we end up with that motley crew.
And just on the note of Kamala running, we know that Kamala chose to run. Would it have been a smarter move if Barack really did care, or Michelle really did care, or hell, Beyonce and Oprah really did care and think, I've got this because I can speak about Kamala? Why didn't any of them decide that they wanted to try to run? You know what I mean? Maybe it would have been a bad choice, of course, but maybe it would have been a good for them, a good choice.
I've been hearing for years that Clooney wants to run, and Clooney is very connected with the Democratic Party. He might make a great politician simply because he's not a politician. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That might, without that exposure to the swamp in Washington, maybe he would be good. Maybe Oprah would be good. I don't know. But there's going to be a lot of things that come up between now and when the next election is in 2029, I believe. It'll be in 2028. The next president will take over in 2029. I don't know if we'll have one of those people step up. I'm really not sure.
They got to make changes, though, obviously. They're going to.
They're going to do a whole postmortem.
Yeah.
They spent $1 billion to try and get Kamala Harris elected, and it didn't work. And it wasn't even close. Like I said, there's still votes to be counted, but as of right now, that electoral college map heavily favors Donald Trump. So how did they spend $1 billion and lose is a big one. And let's talk about policy. It was the economy. People that are suffering because of high inflation, high interest rates. Those people said, we're not doing it anymore. Enough's enough. And I think immigration was probably the second biggest topic in many of the states that voted in this election. So they've got to figure out what they want to do there. But you know what? Don't just take it from me. Take it from the CBC. I don't often quote the CBC or give the CBC much airtime in the pod, but I'm going to, because last night they had a bit of a roundtable discussion as they were trying to figure out what was going on with this election. And there were some pretty good points raised. Listen to this.
Yeah, I think we need to start talking about the idea that you posited there, and that the gal in Georgia posited, that the Democratic Party has moved too far to the left, that they are no longer representing the vast majority of Canadians, of Americans. It's late. But same thing here. Same thing here. And is there a course correction that is needed? I mean, that is, if these swing states keep moving.
So that's enough for now. But basically what Rosemary Barton there is saying, and Rosemary makes no secret about the fact that she is a liberal, a Democrat. She supports that party and she likes them and she does want them to win. That's a liberal starting the conversation that's going to happen in Canada. Is Trudeau taking the Liberals too far to the left? So far to the left that the right has become center. And there's a lot of people that believe that there's some truth to that because of some, not all, but some fairly radical policies that have been implemented over the last 9 years of Justin Trudeau. And if someone like Rosemary Barton is suggesting maybe we went a little too far left, that's a pretty big concern and something that liberals and Democrats are going to have to sit and figure out. I mean, do they really want to double down on climate taxes and things like that, even though it's wildly unpopular? I don't know. It's going to come down to ideology versus practicality. And the practical side should be telling liberals and Democrats, people don't want to hear about it. The climate thing is not the issue you think it is. Abortion, they made a huge deal of it in this election, and it didn't turn out to matter because people are so concerned about the economy. Donald Trump did speak last night. In case you didn't hear it, you might see some clips later on. I'm going to play one in a minute, but I thought this was interesting. Donald Trump doesn't give up the microphone very often, but the first person he handed the microphone to last night in his acceptance speech at Mar-a-Lago was UFC president Dana White. Dana's going to say something here that I think a lot of people will identify with.
Nobody deserves this more than him, and nobody deserves this more than his family does. This is what happens when the machine comes after you. What you've seen over the last several years, this is what it looks like. Couldn't stop him. He keeps going forward. He doesn't quit. He's the most resilient, hardworking man I've ever met in my life. His family are incredible people. This is karma, ladies and gentlemen. He deserves this. They deserve it as a family. I want to thank some people real quick. I want to thank the Nelk boys, Aiden Ross, Theo Vaughn, busting with the boys, and last but not least, the mighty and powerful Joe Rogan. And thank you, America. Thank you. Have a good night.
This is an award show? Jeez.
Joe Rogan may have won that race for Donald Trump. There was a time not that long ago where it seemed like Harris was picking up a lot of momentum. And then Trump did what the Democrats couldn't stop. He went and spoke in a very informal way, and he got personal. He talked about a lot of different things, and he truly spoke about how he felt about different issues. And I think a lot of people listen to Joe Rogan anyway. Well, that's an understatement. It's the #1 podcast in the world. But I think enough people heard him on there and thought, this is a very different portrayal than what I'm getting from the mainstream media. Very different from what I see on MSNBC and CNN and so on and so forth. And it made a lot of people wonder, like, what is the real story? Who is the real Donald Trump? And enough people said that they're okay with Donald Trump as is, and they elected him despite the red flags or whatever you want to call them when it comes to him. Were you surprised at the result? Because yesterday you thought Kamala Harris would win.
I don't know. I just had that. I don't know. I didn't know either way, really. So no, nothing really surprised me.
I'm going to play a little bit of Donald Trump's acceptance speech. It's kind of an acceptance speech, but not really an acceptance speech. It was at 2:30 in the morning in a ballroom at Mar-a-Lago. I think most people were generally hoping for something a little bit more. Let's hear just a little bit of Trump speaking last night.
But it's much easier doing what the networks did or whoever called it, because there was no other path. There was no other path to victory. We also have won the popular vote. That was great. I was proud of that. Who has the #1 best-selling book in the country? Can you believe that? It's ever been. We can do it. But he was, I knew the brain was a good one, about as good as it gets. And we love the family, and we're going to have a great 4 years, and we're going to turn our country around, make it something very special. It lost that little thing called special. We have to make it so. We're going to make this so great. It's the greatest country, and potentially the greatest country in the world by far. And right now, we're going to just work very hard to get all of that back. We're going to make it the best it's ever been. We can do that. If we had to wait longer, I don't know. It was going bad, and it was going bad fast. We're going to have to seal up those borders, and we're going to have to let people come into our country. We want people to come back in, but we have to let them come back in, but they have to come in legally. All
right, man.
Legally.
He's not his best at 2:30 in the morning, is he? Yeah. And I mean, I think that those messages right there are the ones that people who voted for Trump want to hear right away. Yeah, we're going to kick them all out. And if they want to come back in, they got to do it the legal way. We're going to try and fix the economy. And I think at the end of the day, that's all anybody wants. They want to live in peace. They want to live in prosperity. We want a thriving middle class. We want secure borders. And that was what people took away from this election cycle this year. So I'm not surprised that Trump won yesterday. I am pleasantly surprised at how the left, the ones who lost, the Democrats, are handling it. No political violence that I'm aware of. Kamala Harris did not concede overnight, but apparently she's going to concede today. And that's the way it's supposed to work. The peaceful transfer of power in an election that seems to be a free and fair election. Seems to be. I haven't heard much about voter fraud, but no, the day is still young. I'm sure that'll come. Let's see here. We've talked a lot about Trump. Is there anything else? Can I do just a couple of non-Trump things before we get to Reggie?
Yep.
First off, Ontario is launching a new university nursing program for the first time in 20 years. Carleton University is going to offer a direct entry 3-year Bachelor of Science in Nursing program starting next September. It's partnered with the Queensway Carleton Hospital, so the nurses get hands-on training. The first 110 nursing graduates are going to be in the system by 2029.
That's great. That's excellent news. Much needed, but how do we keep them working?
Well,
That's that's good news.
it's great
But
news.
we need so much work in the hospitals in terms of pay and making it better for them.
Yeah, absolutely we do. Why did it take until the end of 2024 to do this? Did universities seriously think there's no market for nursing programs? Was it government funding? Did nobody think of it? Like, what has the government been doing for all these years if we weren't creating more programs to get more nurses in? I thought we agreed on this at the beginning of COVID, that we need more nursing programs and more people graduating.
Are there more people wanting to go into nursing? Like, I don't know where they stand there.
I don't
because
know
It's
either.
one thing to open up programs. It's another thing to have them filled.
The people who do nursing are special kinds of people that have a level of compassion that regular people, I don't know if they have it.
Level of compassion, and they have to have a desire to do it. And I hope there's enough people that do. But like I said, the biggest issue that we have is once they start working, they're not paid as well as they should be.
See, and I don't think that they should pay for nursing school. I think if someone
Yeah.
wants to go to nursing school or med school of any kind, I think that we should
As long
fund
as you keep
that
up your
for him
grades. As long as you keep up grades and show that you're trying and everything else.
and graduate and agree to work here after we've paid for
Yeah.
your education. You got to stay here for what, 5-6 years or whatever, and then you can go wherever you want. If you want to go to the States, fine. But either way, you got to work in our system for a bit. I think that that is perfectly reasonable, a great use of taxpayer money. By the way, another reason that I think a lot of people are excited about Donald Trump winning last night. Look at that. Everything ties into the Trump election win last night. Robert F. Kennedy. Robert F. Kennedy is a Democrat who was going to run as an independent and realized he couldn't win as an independent. So he decided to throw his support behind a Republican, Donald Trump. Part of the reason he did that is because he knows that if he's with Trump, he'll actually get the freedom to do what he wants to do. And what Robert Kennedy wants to do, did I say that right? What he wants to do is he wants to take on big pharma. He thinks that the pharmaceutical industry has way too much power and influence in America, and his commitment was make America healthy again. And he wants to talk about the additives and nonsense that goes into some of the food that we buy that isn't necessary. He's the one who wants to take the fluoride out of our water and take the lead out of our deodorant and all that sort of thing and truly start making people healthy again so that we can get back on track and prosper as a society. So I know that there's people who are excited about RFK being involved with Trump. It's also a little weird to think that Elon Musk may be a cabinet member come January 20th.
Is that a possibility?
Well, Trump had said that if he wins, he's going to bring in Musk to find all the inefficiency and wasted tax dollars in the system. And if Musk can go in, and we know he can run a business from SpaceX to Tesla and you name it, X, that's another one. If there's unnecessary money being spent, I have zero doubt he will find it and eliminate it. But it would be weird to have him there. Okay, I promise not too much more on the election, but I want to get another story in because I think it's important to hear. Waterloo Regional Police investigating a collision involving a vehicle and a pedestrian on Monday night. Police say officers were called to Queens Boulevard in Westmount around 7:20. A 46-year-old Kitchener woman transported to hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. The driver of the vehicle reported no injuries. Police say they charged the pedestrian with failing to cross at a crosswalk. Can I say, yeah.
Because it's not always the driver.
It's not always the driver. Thank you for saying that. It's not always the driver. People cross in the middle of the street. And I always thought, from the time I could first start to walk, my mom warned me, you got to look both ways. You got to cross at a crosswalk or at least cross at an intersection, blah, blah, blah. Some people don't get that message. And in this case, it was so egregious that the cop charged the person who got hit by a car, not the person who hit them.
Good, because it could have been worse. And by the way, it's like you don't think of it this way, especially when the person survived. Obviously, this lady is going to be fine, also charged, but she'll be fine. Do you know how many cases there are of people who are crossing the road, running across the road where they shouldn't be, not looking at the cars, that get killed? And you know what I think about? Is the driver of those cars.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's traumatic. Those
Yeah.
people are absolutely traumatized. And who did that? The pedestrian that ran in the middle of traffic without looking both ways or illegally, whatever the case was. I think about them.
Last one, the Bank of Canada released the deliberations behind last month's half-point interest rate cut. They were only going to cut it by a quarter point, according to the deliberations. The central bank's summary of deliberations says a larger step was taken in the face of a weakening economy and falling inflation. The bank ultimately opted for a half-point cut, bringing the rate to 3.75. The summary also says some governing council members, these are Bank of Canada governors, expressed concern that a half-point cut could be interpreted as a sign of economic trouble and stir up expectations for more oversized interest rate reductions. Yeah, you're absolutely right. People saw it and they want more. And they're not going to stop until we get more interest rate cuts.
Mm-hmm.
They were afraid it would indicate that there's economic trouble ahead. There is economic trouble ahead. There is. It's coming. We talked about this just yesterday. They were actually only going to cut it another quarter point and continue this nonsense with, we got to go slow and stay the course. You know, we got to wait and see what the impact of this cut is to see if we should do more. Complete nonsense. There was actual governors that looked around this country right now and said, we're good.
It's fine.
Just a quarter point cut will be fine. Crazy. All right. Thank you for listening to After 9 today, everybody. If you're not into the politics stuff, I apologize because I know it was a little heavy on it, but it is also...
Well, they could choose to listen or not listen, though. That's choice is theirs.
Sure. It's also the most talked about story globally right now. And it always is when a new president is elected.
For sure.
We got to go. But before we do, we're going to leave you with a replay of an interview from this morning on the Scott and Kat radio show with Reggie Cecchini, Washington correspondent for Global News.
Listen, side note here. He's so good, isn't he?
Oh, my God.
What a professional. And this, you're going to hear from Reggie himself about how tired he is, but you couldn't even tell unless we did talk about it. Here's Reggie.
It is the day after Election Day in America. We're going to do a follow-up now on something that we did yesterday when we spoke to Global News Washington correspondent Reggie Cecchini. And Reggie was on all night last night with Donna Friesen and great coverage from Washington as the results were coming in. Well, let's follow up and see what happened. Let's bring in Reggie now. How are you, Reggie?
The results are in.
Long night or what?
Yeah, I mean, I slept at my desk. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
I have a blow-up mattress in the office, and I slept at my desk.
Oh, my goodness. All right. Well, hopefully you get a little R&R after this is over, but I have a feeling it's going to be busy going forward. Donald Trump won it by what seems to be a landslide if all of those swing states hold up in favor of Trump.
Yeah, and look, there are still swing states that we are waiting for. We don't have Nevada. We don't have Arizona. We don't have Michigan. And we're waiting for those numbers to come in. And as of right now, if you're just looking at the number, it's within the margins of where those polls showed that things were going to be. It's not going to stay like that. And this is kind of like going back to 2016 when Hillary Clinton was in the race. There appeared to be a secret Trump vote out there, or that pollsters were just getting all of their information wrong. At the end of the day, though, this is a historic day. This is the first time that a president has won a non-consecutive term since the 1800s.
Wow.
It's also the first time that a convicted felon is the president of the United States.
And you know what? Since you brought that up, how's that going to work? He's supposed to be sentenced in like 2 months or something like that, right?
Yeah, he's supposed to be sentenced on the 26th, and he will be, because that's a state-level crime in New York. He can't get out of any kind of state-level investigation, but there's a special counsel that's looking into the attempts to overturn the 2020 election. That will go away. Any federal investigation that's being led by the U.S. Department of Justice, when Donald Trump steps in, he will be able to appoint somebody to end all of those investigations, and he's now given essentially broad coverage for the next 4 years. And remember, the Supreme Court in the U.S. also gave presidents immunity to say, if you do certain things in office, you can't be charged for it. So he kind of is sitting under a protective umbrella through 2028.
Interesting. Okay, so now that the election is more or less over, I know there's still some votes to count. What happens now? Trump is going to get sworn in on the 20th, but until then, Joe Biden is still president and Kamala Harris is still vice president. Do they have to have any interactions of any kind? I mean, Trump and Harris, are we going to see them together at the White House for anything?
Probably not until the day that he is sworn in January. That's when there's usually a handoff from one party to the other. Otherwise, there will be no in-person interactions between the two of them. I think if you're asking the question, what's going to happen next, there is going to be a post-mortem. There is going to be a reevaluation inside the Democratic Party to say, what did we do wrong? How did we miss so many of these signs? Why are so many of the Americans in this country not lining up behind us? And I think at the end of the day, the basic way to put this is people in the Democratic Party thought Trump and Trumpism was a passing fancy. It was going to go away. The vast majority of this country now believes Trumpism to be something to follow. They feel that that is going to bring this country into a new direction, and it is now impossible to ignore that.
One of the things that the pundits that were on TV last night, and including on Global, pointed out was how much of the Latino vote and the Black American vote showed up to vote for Donald Trump. And I think that the Democrats are a little bit surprised at that.
Of course they are, particularly when you look back, a week and a half with Donald Trump's big rally at Madison Square Garden in New York, where there was inflammatory rhetoric that was made particularly against Puerto Ricans. And if you look at one county in the state of Florida, which the vast majority of it are made up of Puerto Ricans who have moved from the island to the mainland, Joe Biden won that county 4 years ago overwhelmingly by something like 20 points. Donald Trump won that and flipped it into his favor. And again, the question here is, was it comments about, trying to deal with the border, trying to deal with immigration, trying to deal with the economy that brought people into his fray? He was making inroads with Black voters and with Latin American voters. The second question is, did they just simply not show up for Kamala Harris?
Interesting.
I know it's early still there, but are you getting a feel or a sense of anything there while you're in Washington right now?
I mean, look, there's a lot that's got to be figured out over the next couple of months here, because this is going to spread way beyond just kind of the White House and the Capitol and the district. This is going to have trickle effects. Donald Trump is, interested in things like tariffs. That could make things in Canada more expensive, particularly if the government in Canada retaliates and puts tariffs on things coming out of the United States. But two, I mean, the U.S. is seen as kind of a global protector. What does this do for the war in the Middle East? What does this do for the war with Ukraine? What does it do when you have a president who kind of praises people like Vladimir Putin or Chinese President Xi Jinping? There's a lot of diplomatic concern. There's a lot of democratic concern. And there's going to be a lot of trade concern just between Canada and the U.S. It's a huge border. And there's a lot of money that goes back and forth over that border. There could be an impact here on Canada and elsewhere.
Is Trump going to do his transition from Florida and sort of work out of there and do news conferences there? Or is he actually going to go to Washington? Do you have any indication yet?
He'll probably stay in Florida for the time being, but what he needs to do, he needs to start putting together a transition team. That's something that there's a deadline for that, and it's long past as to what they're supposed to do to try and figure out who they're going to put in cabinet, who's going to take certain positions. He now needs to get cracking on interviewing people, on finding who he's going to bring into the fold here, and then by January, he'll be able to walk into the White House the day of the inauguration and set up shop again. We don't know if his wife is going to come. She said she never wanted to come back to Washington again. This could be a situation where the U.S. doesn't have a first lady. But Trump will likely stay at Mar-a-Lago. This is the place that ascended him to the presidency now for the second time. This is his home base. Florida is kind of, Washington South.
Wow. And what happens for you guys now as far as your coverage on Global is concerned? Is Donna staying down there for tonight? Is she heading back? How does it work?
The crew's down here for at least the rest of this week. Then they go home, and then all the work just kind of falls back onto our bureau's shoulders. So there's a lot to do over the next week, but there's a lot to do over the next 4 years.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you very much, Reggie. We always appreciate your insight from Washington. I hope that you're safe down there. I know that they were set up for the possibility of violence. It doesn't look like that's playing out, but still be careful, be vigilant, and we're going to check in with you anytime we need to, okay?
It's 27 degrees here today. There is some plus sides.
Lovely. That does sound lovely.
Doing better than us. Love it. Love it. All right, Reggie, try and get some sleep if you can.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, take care.